So, that put me off then also. So in terms of thinking about what students are used to pre higher education, that their assessments and exams typically kind of prioritize this like knowledge acquisition, remembering things to put in their exam, kind of fact based. And then when they enter higher education, there's this huge transition in not only just their studying in terms of their levels of independence that they have to kind of manage, um, but also their assessment experiences. So there's lots more kind of variety of assessments, moving away from just an exam to lots of mini exams or mini courseworks across lots of different topics, as well as then this shift in terms of what is expected of them to perform in these assessments. So successful performance often shifts towards these higher order cognitive skills like synthesizing information, problem solving, being a critical thinker, which is not necessarily present or they have necessarily undertook too much previously in their education. And then when we think about that in terms of their experience, the student experience versus the academic experience, where this is these kind of higher order cognitive skills are things that we do every day. We do them when we're kind of writing our lectures. We do them when we're reading our academic papers. We do them when we're writing papers for publication. So we can develop this like tacit knowledge in relation to these skills that they are common sense and obvious. But for those students who are novice and coming into higher education, these processes can be a bit opaque and difficult to understand. So I often get students asking me, what do you mean by critical thinking? I don't understand what that means, how I'm supposed to develop that. Because especially when we think about critical thinking at kind of A level, students are told what kind of to write. They're told this is a limitation, write this limitation because that's going to get you the grade. So they don't often have those critical thinking skills developed for themselves. So it's a real transition in terms of what they're expected to kind of show skill wise, as well as kind of a whole new topic as well. So next slide, please. Thank you. So some previous research I've done really highlighted that for successful engagement in assessment related activities, students need to feel competent and confident. So when we talk about competency, that's students understanding what steps are required for them to complete their assessments. So if it is critical thinking, for example, they need to understand how to think critically, what they need to develop to show that they can think critically. And they also need to feel confident in their ability to undertake those steps as well. So they need to know what they need to do, and they need to feel confident in being able to kind of demonstrate those skills as well. So that's something, if we're thinking about all of these whole variety of skills that they need to show, they need to feel competent and confident across that whole range of learning outcomes that they're going to be assessed on in terms of their all of their assessments. That's quite a big undertaking for students who are new to all these kind of skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. So kind of this big question kind of made me think, well, how can we help students to kind of understand how they can do this? How do we help support them during that transitional period? And this was kind of through experience of teaching. I did quite a lot of teaching of the first years in my programme, and that kind of development of them through the year and helping them to kind of understand how they can develop those skills. So next slide, please. Thank you. So generally, good practices kind of focus on the helping to scaffold their learning. So lots of guidance and support, helping to encourage independent reflection for themselves and identify their own gaps in understanding. Support and encouragement can help boost students' confidence and motivation. So knowing that they've got that kind of support around them. When we help them to understand like that they are a competent learner, so improving their academic self-efficacy, we can do that by making sure that feedback that we provide is really constructive. So it's kind of forward feeding. They're thinking about what they can do next time. They have opportunities to practice the skills that we're expecting to see in their assessment. So kind of building those into our teaching and giving them little opportunities to develop those things as we go through can help improve their self-efficacy about them as a higher education learner, and helping them to challenge any self-limiting beliefs as well. So those are all kind of general good practice in terms of helping to boost students' motivation and beliefs in themselves. And also providing rationale for skill development as well. So making sure students understand why strategies that we're asking them to develop are useful and how it will help them when it comes to their assessments. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the scaffolding side of the talk as well. So this kind of came about that at Manchester last year, we got a new assessment tool called Cadmus. So this is an end-to-end online assessment workflow. I don't know if anyone else has used this tool yet, but I thought, right, I'm going to give this a go for my module. So it's a supportive and scaffolded assessment experience and integrates with BLE and Turnitin. So I'm using this, I've used this tool, so that's kind of how I'm going to talk about it today, but the scaffolding itself can be done outside of this. So this was the Cadmus tool. You can see that you kind of get this you choose what type of assessment you're doing, and then you get like a kind of a template's the word I'm trying to think of, for how to present that assessment to the students. Sorry, if you can click the next slide, please. So what I found really useful is in this template that you had, and again, each template, so if I chose essay, but if you had a lab report, there would be a particular template for that's more specific to what a lab report would expect for an assessment. But what I found really useful, and what I'm going to focus on today, is the checklist function that Cadmus had. So this was very kind of a well scaffolded checklist with prompts and a structure for me to kind of input my own. So it would prompt me to, what resources do you want to include for your students here? So I was like, okay, what resources do I want to include? So it was really kind of a useful prompt for me. And it helped to break down the steps that students needed to go through to develop an assignment which would meet the learning objectives. And this really helped, the kind of breaking down those skills really helped me as an academic to step away from that tacit knowledge and think exactly about what students would need to do to demonstrate the core skills that they needed to show to meet the ILOs of the assessment itself. And it also really encouraged me to think about what signposting and sources of support that students would need or could use to develop certain skills that I'm asking them to demonstrate in their assessment, so that it's kind of all interlinked with each other. So what I'll do now is I'm going to share the checklist that I used for the assessment, and highlight some things that I found was quite important in doing so and helping to break down those skills and scaffold that experience. So next slide, please. Thank you. So just for context, this was a year 1 semester 2 module, and it was an optional format assessment on advice for a teacher on a chosen topic in the realms of child and development. That was the kind of the context for the assessment. So next slide, please. So this is kind of what the checklist looks like in Cadmus. So some of these checklist items were already kind of pre-assigned within Cadmus, and then I added extra ones in there as well. So it was a really good prompt for me to think about. I just kind of spent like a couple of hours doing this, and it really helped me to get to grips with what actually am I asking students to undertake for this assignment. and therefore what do they need to know, what support and skills do they need to do to be able to have to demonstrate those skills in their assignment as well. So as you can see here, the checklist, it's really quite nicely functional, and it helps to break down the skills. So if we can think about what skills we're asking them to do, if we just say, go and research a topic, that's probably kind of not enough detail for students, and they might feel overwhelmed and confused in terms of, well, I don't know how to research a topic. So breaking those skills down into smaller skills can help them to understand the steps that they need to follow and build their confidence in those things as well. So that was kind of helpful in terms of breaking down what we mean by those skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. It also was helpful to try to scaffold some opportunities for adding feedback and review as well. So this was useful. So for example, I asked them to bring a draft in, and we looked at that in class. So I built that into the checklist. So that was part of the checklist. And you can see here as well that adding dates can help the students with their time management skills and encourage like consistent work on their assessment. So helping to scaffold their time as well as the skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. So using the checklist to help encourage self-reflection as well. So I decided to try and use this checklist part in terms of questions to ask themselves. And I based this around the learning objectives. So the bold bits there are the actual elements, key elements of the learning, the ILOs for the assignment. And I'm quite glad I did do this, because another good thing about Cadmus is you get a lot of feedback in terms of what students have accessed, and only 22% actually even looked at the rubric for the assignment for this. So by using this checklist function and centering that around the ILOs, it helped them to understand what they were being assessed against, and therefore what was required, if they weren't as au fait with actually checking what the assignment rubric was. So yeah, the reflective questions hopefully helped them to kind of think about it in a easy to digest way, and prompting them to seek help and advice if there was a gap between, if they answered the question as no, I've not done that, then they need to kind of think, okay, what do we need to do to kind of focus in on that and improve that. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. And also Cadmus is quite useful because you can add links into the resources as well. So as you can see here, read the marking rubric, and then you just link the marking rubric in there. So students, it's very easy for them to understand this is exactly what the document that she's referring to, click there to do that as well. So it was quite a nice tool in order to kind of put everything together, so it's all kind of in one place. Okay, next slide. I'm very conscious of time. So I'll quickly rattle through some student feedback on this. So I centered this feedback, or my questions around asking students feedback around this kind of levels of like competence and confidence, because this is where I was kind of coming from with my previous work. So next slide, please. So I've got here that you can see that the students generally felt that they kind of that the using the checklist function helped them to understand what they needed to do for the assignment. Next slide, please. And improve their confidence in planning the assignment. And next slide, please. And to a lesser extent, improve their confidence in actually completing the assignment. So next slide, please. I've got it all kind of summarized here. So you can see that 88% either agreed or strongly agreed that it helped improve their understanding of what they needed to do. So I found that was pretty good. So it helped them to understand what exactly the assignment was actually asking them to do. It also generally increased their confidence in planning, but to a lesser extent increased their confidence in actually completing the assignment. So that's really useful food for thought going forward for me in terms of my practice next year, and thinking, right, okay, so it's helping them to understand what they need to do, but they're still not confident in completing it. So how can we kind of bridge that gap a little bit more? But generally, I'm quite happy with the feedback that we got there. Next slide, please. So to summarise, as educators in higher education, it would be beneficial for us to appreciate the gap between the expectations in higher education and what we expect students to be demonstrating, and students' current skill level and their experiences from kind of college and GCSEs, and what those experiences have for them and what we're then asking them to do. I would recommend that checklists can be a useful tool for us as academics to reflect on and break down the stages and skills and steps that students need to undertake to successfully achieve their learning objectives. And it helped me as well to kind of consider prompts for sources of support that could be offered. So when I was working on this, one of the learning objectives is effective synthesis of arguments. And then I was like, we've really not got many support for students on how to do that and how they can understand that. So that prompted me to create a resource, which I then embedded. So it helped understand what that gap was and how we can help support that gap as well. Next slide, please. I think that's me done. It's just references and questions there as well. So